So right when Henrik asked me about to give a talk, I was struggling with a subject that I often struggle with, and that's application monitoring. Monitoring in general, I actually, on a day-to-day basis, I do a lot of that monitoring. I have a baby boy at home, and we have these baby monitors, and this is that simple to set up, right? You turn on one unit at the baby's cradle, and the other unit with me, and I have total monitoring of my child. So I was thinking, whenever I try to do monitoring of my applications or applications in general, it's not that simple. And I usually get pretty frustrated. The thing is then, what usually happens is that you try to use some tools and you come halfway, but you never really get all the way. You never really get to the point where you have automatic recovery or failover, or even worse, you don't even know if something happens. The application crashes and you don't even notice. So you just notice when the customer calls. It's a little parallel to backup systems. You realize you need it when it's too late. So tonight I would like to talk a little bit about application metrics, and I discovered a new tool that I really like to present to you. I didn't write anything about it, about the tool. It's not me owning anything there. I just really think it's a great tool. Before that, though, my name is Matthias. I work at a company called Transmode. We build optical fiber equipment for operators, fiber optical equipment, I want to say. And the group I work in is that we build monitoring systems for networks. So we're really good at monitoring equipment, transmission equipment. We get alarms and events and power measurements and everything. But we really also want to start monitoring our own application, and that's really where the software. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So it happened to me that I deployed an application, didn't even notice that when it crashed, I didn't even notice it. And I think that's something that people pay too little attention to, and people usually think, I can do it later. The thing is, though, it's going to happen to you sooner or later. It has happened to me, and whenever it happens, I was like, I wish I would have set up better monitoring. I wish I would have had a better metrics dashboard that would have shown me trends before the event happened. Or I wish I would have had a really nice central logging infrastructure set up so I could go back and look at what happened before the disaster took place. And really, when we talk about DevOps, the idea is that you own the code, you own the application. It's your responsibility that that application also feels healthy. And if it's your responsibility, you also have to know if something happens. And the whole thing gets even more complicated and important once we start to be more distributed, and more. If we go towards microservices, we have a lot of applications in our architecture. It doesn't get easier. So you start to look at tools, and you find a lot of tools. We have a lot of slides like that today. And also you start to feel sick, like what's the difference between tools and which tools meets which use case, what do I have to choose? So my journey started actually with a cool tool called Moonin about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and it sucks so bad. I mean, anybody of you used Moonin? It's still using. Sorry, I'm sorry for you. I mean, it's not. Moonin is. It solved the use case back then. The idea is that you had a central master that would pull nodes regularly, every 5 minutes, I think. And on the nodes, you would have an agent, and you have plugins, or basically applications that collect different metrics, memory usage, CPU usage, and things like that. And with that data, you would basically build nice graphs and static HTML and present it. The problem with Moonin is it can break anywhere, and it's a hell to debug. And once you actually have your graphs, you can't really drain down. You can't really. It's really hard to do something more than just visualize a simple metric. So from there, or about the same time, I also started using Nagios, basically just to see if applications are live. And Nagios is very powerful, and it sucks almost more than Moon. So after maybe a few years, you start to realize, there's graphite. Everybody's talking about graphite, and it's like heaven. Suddenly you have metrics, you have hierarchical metrics. You can build those metric trees or hierarchies. And you start to instrumentalize your code and the infrastructure, and everything is just paradise. Until you start to deploy graphite, which is just hell. So you realize, well, graphite is nice, but you deploy it once and you try to forget how you did it because it was painful, and whenever the infrastructure dies, you're back at square one. And it's so painful that sometimes you just, we can do it later. And and you don't have any metrics monitoring anymore. And then, not quite recently, we started looking at, where is it on the slide? Grafana. I didn't even write it down. It's horrible. And I think, was it this week you have a meetup about, talked about Grafana as well? Is that correct?
On Monday.
On Monday, yes. Yeah. So Grafana is basically a web interface. It started as a JavaScript application that runs in your browser, and you can have different backends. And one of them, the first one I think, was Graphite. But you can have different backends that you can pull metrics from. And it's beautiful, and you can create really nice graphs and dashboards and everything. And you still have the problem that Graphite sucks to deploy, but suddenly it's beautiful, at least. And then Grafana started to support different backends, and then what we started to use is something called Influx, a database. Anybody using Influx? Yeah. So, and suddenly you have a backend that's easy to deploy. So you almost find the Holy Grail. And then, when I prepared that talk, I thought, I want to kind of show people what there is. And I also, in the abstract, I mentioned logging as well, and Elastx. It's not on the slide here. I thought I would give an overview. And then I started reading more about Prometheus. Anybody heard or using Prometheus here?
Only heard.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of chatter, more and more noise about Prometheus. I was like, I have to read about it. And once I started reading about it and using it, it's like, no, I just want to talk about Prometheus from now on. That's just, it's really nice. Sorry?
Have you deployed it yet?
On my laptop.
Was it easier than Graphite then?
Definitely. My metric for easiness of deployment is, can you write a Docker file in 5 minutes? And if you can't, it's not easy. So, and if there's already an image, you don't even have to write a Docker file. A good image, of course. So, and you're going to see, during my talk, I'm going to talk a whole bunch about Docker. Those that know you, I like Docker, and I'm a co-organizer of the Docker Stockholm Meetup group. But Prometheus can be used without Docker. So, Prometheus. It was released, I think, sometime last year by SoundCloud. They started out with blogging a whole bunch about how they handle metrics and what they do, and then they started open sourcing. Or I think they started Prometheus from the beginning as an open source tool. So Prometheus is a server that's quite easy to deploy, and it supports different backends, or it can pull metrics from different sources. What's different from Prometheus to Graphite or Influx is that you don't push metrics into Prometheus, but Prometheus scrapes metrics from different targets. The targets can be your application that is instrumented with a language library. So they have language libraries for Java, Ruby, Go, Python, Bash, Node, different. It's growing. It can be just a runtime that has an exporter that day, or some third-party deliver. So for the Docker engine, there is a Docker container exporter. For the Mesos cluster, the same thing. For CloudWalk, you have that. Java JMX, StatsD. Then you have some tools that already have Prometheus built in out of the box. And if you really need to do pushing, need to push your metrics, because you can't change that, there's also a possibility to have a push gateway. So basically, it's an intermediary that you push the metrics to, and then Prometheus can scrape the metrics from that gateway. Once you have metrics, your stuff in Prometheus, you want to get to it, of course, so you have a query language, which is very powerful. It's different from the query language that Influx or Graphite gives us, but it's equally or even more powerful, I would say. So the first one is just, I want to see all metrics. It's called HTTP request total. And what you see here is we don't have any hierarchy as you would used to be as you used to maybe from Influx or Graphite. What you do have is you have labels for different dimensions, they are called in Prometheus. And you can see that in the curly braces here. Now we say you want to see the request total for the HTTP requests for the label, environment label that's equal to production. So and they call it dimension because you can, with every label, you can filter and sum or collect metrics across every label or dimension, so to say. And you can also create ad hoc dimensions, for instance, with regular expressions. So you want to see a specific metrics for everything has a name, everything has the string worker in their name label. I'll show you more just to get more concrete, just an overview. So I think the easiest thing is that we would try to hook it up, and I'm going to start with Docker, of course. It's pretty simple to get going. Let's see. So what I have set up, what do we see here?
Drum roll, please.
Sorry?
Drum roll.
Drum roll. I didn't start in yet. I did start it, but that's not what I wanted to show. Yeah, anyway. Let me show you in a browser. So Prometheus has its own web interface. And you land on a status page. There you can see that it's up and running. You can see its configuration. It doesn't really matter. But you can see now I have two targets that I'm scraping. That's already set up. One target, the first one is the exporter, and that's actually the Docker exporter. So that's a small little container that talks to the Docker engine and exports a whole bunch of things to, or exposes a whole bunch of things to Prometheus. And then Prometheus scrapes itself as well. It's a little bit weird, but it monitors itself. So you can go to the graph page, and there you can start to look at your metrics. And you have a browser here. You can say, well, I want to see memory usage of my containers, for instance. Execute. And you get a very beautiful view. So I'm going to push on graph so you get something more. And you see, I was actually hacking a little bit with that thing during the other talks. So there was a whole bunch of containers up before. But you see, you can see here, for instance, if I go over one metric, you can see that's a container ID, that's the whole string here. And here you see all the labels, all the dimensions that that metric comes with or is annotated with. So I can filter and search for all those, along all those dimensions. So for instance, I enriched I told the exporter for Docker, I said, you should add the zone EU Central 1. Now actually not, I'm not running in Frankfurt, I'm running my laptop, but I actually wanted to do it in Frankfurt first, that's why it's there. An example, search, filter, I could say, okay, I only want to see metrics for Docker containers of that have the image with the image exporter, and that's how my something that I know is already alive. And now we use a regular expression, so I don't have to spell out the whole name. That was nice. Image. So now I have my exporter containers. And I could, once, as you know also as well from Graphite or similar, you can average. That's not very useful right now, but you can do a whole bunch of things in the query browser. So we have Prometheus is up and running and we're scraping data, but we really want to see something more beautiful. So I also set up Grafana, which has support for Prometheus. Isn't that great? There's a whole bunch of different dashboards as well, but I want to show Grafana because, I mean, it's made in Sweden. And set up a dashboard here, and this is now, yeah, that's the same graph that we saw before. That's all my, that's exactly the same string source query I had in that different UI here, but in Grafana. And all you have to do is, in the data sources here, in the data sources, you just tell it to talk to my Prometheus server. Very simple setup. Okay, so now we have part of our stack up and running. Let's see. That's and Prometheus, everything is done through config files. It's a really bad contrast now, but so what I did, you didn't see me doing that, but to add the container exporter to be able to get container metrics, I added a target group, a new job called the container exporter, and that job includes a target group which scrapes data from endpoint. And the target group is not the simplest way you can do that. You can add several targets to a target group. You can even add service discovery there, so you don't have to have a hard-coded endpoint. You can tell it. You can use some DNS service discovery or different mechanisms, so it just scrapes all your load balancers, for instance.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
The metrics page,
Yep.
is it protected in any way, like with the username and password, or?
The Prometheus one,
Yeah.
you can set up. I double check. I'm not sure.
But you're not using.
No, right now I'm just on my laptop, only locally. I think I've seen something about authentic. Yeah, it is. It is. You log in. You have authentication, and then you have some SSL support. So you can help. I didn't do that now for the purpose of demo, but I did log in with root, of course, the best username. Yeah, so Grafana, we did that. But we want a different front end, and that nicely enough that I'm not the only one talking about Slack here. So having dashboards is one thing, it's really nice, but I really want to be like punched in the head if something goes wrong, because I don't want to look at dashboards all day. So I want to set up rules that are or alarms that are triggered as soon as some metric trips over a threshold. And I want to be, called or paged or whatever. Now, in that example, I'm going to do a Slack integration, but with Prometheus, you can have different endpoints that can alert you. So email could be one thing, or some hosted tools. To do that, no, let's go back here. An example, so you just add you can add a rule file where you define your alert criteria, and that's an example here. For instance, I want to get an alert if something goes down. So I said the metric up is 0, is false. Then I want to get an alarm. It's called instance down, and you can add some summary and description. Once you do that, just add that line. You see my speaker note is pretty easy. Good. So this is my Prometheus configuration file. Just add that line, and I'm gonna restart Prometheus. So, let's see if that works. Now I have that line here, as I answered just before. And now in the alarm tab, I get I actually defined 3 different alarms in my rules file, but I have now 3 alarms and they're all not active and they're not connected to Slack yet, but that we'll get there in a second. But now they start to be active, because in every alarm you can say, well, the one I showed you, if something is down for more than 5 minutes, give me an alarm. So they start to be triggered now. So now I have a high memory alert that I created, or a minor underrun. I get to that later. And if you want to use Slack integration, you'll start a tool called the Alert Manager, and there you basically tell Prometheus how you want to be alerted. So in that example, I use a Slack integration, and I just tell it the webhook URL that I get from Slack. And once that is up, configured, I should start to get alerts from Slack. So let's see. I just set up a new channel in Slack. I hope that works. You don't see it. Here. Yeah. So here we got a high memory alert in Slack. And it just was created 8:15, and we get new ones now. So nice, that works. 2 different alerts. Okay, now, the thing is, up until now, we basically just monitored ourselves and some containers, but what we really want to do is monitor our application, right? So that's our last step. And for the sake of the example, I'm going to have a Java drop wizard web server that I want to monitor. And I was thinking about, I want to monitor something that gives us some useful metrics to visualize. So I actually took an application from another talk I had when at JFocus this year, when I was talking about what I was introducing Docker to Java developers. And in that example, I invented something new. It's called a qubit coin. And just bear with me now, it's a little bit... the idea was that Bitcoins are a little bit... 2013 maybe. So we want to use qubits. And a qubit is a unit of information. And it's not just the 1 and the 0, it has actually 4 states. So with qubits you can actually have exponentially more money. And what we're going to do now in the Bitcoin world, you have miners that mine Bitcoins, right? And then those Bitcoins, hopefully you put in your Bitcoin wallet somewhere that it doesn't get hacked. And then you can access it and sell it and trade it or whatever. So in our example, our application is just not one application, but it's actually a whole bunch of miners that create qubit coins, put them in a database or in a wallet. And then we have a web application, which is our Java server, our drop wizard server that visualizes the balance that we have in the wallet. Those workers here, they're all Docker containers. So each worker or miner is a Docker container, the wallet is a Redis database, and that is a web server in a container. So once everything is up, yeah, I already started it, that was a mistake. But anyway, so what we already get out of the box now is we get metrics from all the containers. So we get CPU usage and memory usage and all those things from all the containers running. But what I also want to do, I want to instrument a Java application itself. So I want to get metrics from inside the application out into Prometheus. So how would that look like? And I'm going to actually do that again. So, I'm sorry I'm jumping around here with presenter mode. Where are we? Yeah. So I mentioned those client libraries that Prometheus, the project has, and there's one a library for Java. And what you basically do is you add, now in that example, I want to see the number of coins in my metrics, so the balance. So I add a metric called the gauge, basically something that shows you a certain value at a certain time. And it's a really easy API. I just create a gauge, give it a name and a description, and then I set it in regular intervals to something. Well, I don't always set it to 42, of course, but that's just for the sake of the example. you can use different metrics. You can use summaries, counters, and histograms. Once we do that, then we just the Prometheus library also supplies a Jetty servlet that you can just hook into already. If you already have a Jetty or Tomcat, you can just add that servlet into your runtime, so you get a new endpoint for the metrics that can be scraped. And if for scraping, you just add a new job in the Prometheus configuration. I add a new target here for my web app, and I also label it with some labels that I choose myself. For instance, I'm going to label it with environment production, and I'm going to give it, here again we have the zone central 1, EU central 1. Okay, are you with me so far?
Yeah.
So let's add that. So the application is already running, and one miner I think is already running. I'm going to add that target to Prometheus, so we start to see coins. It's called the coins, the counter, in Prometheus. And then we can also start to scale up the miners, so we start to get some more interesting data. So where are we? I have to copy that text. Let's go back here, copy paste. I'm going to just add it to the end after my that. I'm going to restart my Prometheus container. And if I go back to that view, that didn't work. Okay. That's not so nice. I had that before, actually. I hope it wouldn't happen, but somehow the Docker Compose is a tool to start and orchestrate a whole bunch of different containers that talk to each other, basically for development. Not that we're fighting quite a lot, so it dies on me a few times sometimes. Anyway, so now it should be up and running again. And now we have a third target here. That's the web app target. And it's healthy. We get some labels that I set in the configuration files. If I go up to the graph view, I just see a metric called coins. And here I have 0 coins. That's not so great. But at least I get the metric. Okay, at 0. We'll look at it shortly why that will be 0. Let me just try again. If it doesn't work, it's not there. So let's up again. Coins. Oh, that's wrong. Come on. Still 0. But what I can show you is I set up a dashboard here in Grafana. Here we measure the coin, not actually the memory here. But another thing that we measure is the number of miners. That's the miners that are the workers that actually create the bitcoins, or the qubit coins. And I just show you the query here. What we basically do is we look at, here, that graph, we just look at the memory of what the coiners, the miners consume, and then we sum up how many we have, so we can actually see one number. We show one number of how many we have. It should be 2 right now. And then I set up an alarm that triggers if you have less than 3, I think. So we have a miner on the run, meaning that we have, right now we have we say if we have less than 3 minors, I want to get an alarm, and so we should see that in Slack as well. I think we saw that before. Here, it doesn't trigger that often. Here we have a minor on the run. So now we can start to scale our application horizontally. So we get some more minors. I'm gonna scale minor. Let's add 20. So now we're starting 20 or 19 new containers with the new miners. So we should start the money should start rolling in. If you look at the metrics here, we should start to get more miners. See how fast it updates. Yeah, so now we have here, it says 21. You see the graph. Number of miners is 21. So the Prometheus, and then you see all the containers names, the different colors. And you actually don't see them in the graph because they're just down here, because we also see the total here. But the nice thing is now that since I was just using a query and looked for a certain image and not a specific instance, I didn't have to hard code any endpoints, and I have to hard code any URLs or any other thing that I have to change in, or that I have to query about, that I have to change after deployment. I can just, it's basically just a really powerful way to query for different kind of metrics or different kind of dimensions in my metric space. And I would have wanted to show you the money. Let's see if that worked. So my web application actually listens on port 8080, and the web application just shows us the balance and the recent coins that were collected. So we actually see the money is rolling in. I don't know why the actual metric coin doesn't show us anything right now, but the point I'm trying to make is that you can use both. You can scrape both your application and your infrastructure with Prometheus quite easily. Okay, where are we? Let's go back to the presentation. So, I think that's the Holy Grail. Yeah, any questions? I think one thing I think is actually not the Holy Grail, just to be honest. There's a whole bunch of things missing. So what I really would like, it's still not as simple as just putting on a baby monitor. It has to get simpler. It has to be more automatic, and I would really like to have some automatic correlation between logging and metrics. And I haven't really seen a simple solution for that. I would like to have a metrics graph time-wise, and I would like to have an overlay of, let's say, logging information and metrics on top of each other. I want to be able to easily correlate that. Today, you use a tool like that for metrics, and then you maybe have Kibana or something different for logging. But I haven't seen, maybe you could, if you know about it, maybe you please tell me, but I haven't seen a tool that actually combines both into one simple tool to do diagnosis and monitoring.
Sounds like a great idea for a new startup.
There's a whole bunch of startups in that space. But it would be, so if you start your startup, give me a call. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks.